Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 924, or maybe I should say Blitz games. I wanted to take a quick look at this first game in the Queen's Gambit because there were a couple of points in the opening I thought were interesting. So in this game, White started off with d4. I went knight f6, and then he went knight f3. You can see that's a little bit unusual, but he, after I played d5, then he plays c4. So he transposed back into a normal Queen's Gambit declined, and I play the Slav defense. So he goes knight c3, I go e6, all this is very standard. And now he goes bishop g5. This is actually the second choice here, and quite popular, but I don't see it that often in my own practice, and I sometimes forget these lines. So a couple things to know here. One is this d takes c4. You can take that pawn right away and try and hold on to it, even with b5. And that's known as the Botvinnik variation of the semi-Slav. And it's a pretty tricky and tactical line, so it's interesting to look at. And if you become a specialist in it, maybe you can do some good stuff with it. But it's dangerous to wander into unprepared. The other move to know here is h6. This is the Moscow variation, and probably the kind of the most normal way to play. You can see it's the most popular. And then it used to be thought that taking was mandatory because otherwise a black can grab a pawn there, and it seems like there's no consequence. Anyway, this is an interesting position for both sides, but black should be fine there. It was discovered that just retreating the bishop and allowing black to take this pawn and even hold on to it with b5. Actually, g5 is the normal move here. This turns out to be, yeah, maybe I think you play g5 and then b5. This also turns out to be good for white. So white is down a pawn, but white has compensation and also gets very tactical. So not something you want to wander into unprepared. So in this position, playing h6 is fine, but maybe not going for the if he plays bishop h4, don't go for this pawn grab. It's a little bit risky, but you can play things like bishop e7 and knight bd7 like I played in the game, and you should be okay. Anyway, the way I played it was all right. I just, instead of playing either h6 or d takes c4, I played knight bd7, which after e3, this actually would transpose into the Cambridge Springs variation with queen to a5, and that's the most standard way to play it. I played h6, which is not bad. Oh, the other way of playing is bishop e7, and you get a kind of orthodox variation. I played h6 first. There's nothing wrong with that move. That is fine. But maybe this move is a little bit dubious. So I think my play in the opening was fine up to this point. And here I should really just break the pin. And this is close to equal for black. So black is fine here. And white still has some slight opening edge, so white is doing okay too. I went bishop d6, and white after this has a bigger than normal opening advantage. So I think it's better to break the pin here. I guess one point is that this bishop, this bishop can always drop back to this diagonal and trade off my dark squared bishop. So it doesn't seem to have much of a future on this diagonal in the normal course of events. Let's see, but I went bishop d3 here, and no, he went bishop d3 here, and then he took, and I played b5. So both of us are starting to play this like a Moran variation, but it's not. The Moran variation, e3 is played instead of bringing the bishop out to g5, and so it has a different character. And so the way that white played the following moves is not quite correct. This is still fine for black, it seems. Well, I mean, no worse. After bishop d6, black is worse, and it stays worse for the next few moves. Maybe that's the best way to put it. Let's see. He went bishop d3, went a6, and then he went e4. So this is the point where he starts to give the advantage back to me. He has the advantage up to this point after my mistake, and he could keep it by just castling. That's a very normal move there. But he played e4, and I played e5. And e5 is just a good move here. It stops him from pushing those pawns forward with the fork. And so white still has that opening advantage. It's no longer really pronounced, and black is close to equal, but he should just go ahead and castle here and keep that slight opening edge, and he should be fine. Instead, I think he calculated this next sequence out and just calculated it incorrectly, because he played the next few moves kind of fast. He took here, which is already a slight mistake, and black has some advantage after this because I get a nice piece here. But he kept taking with the intent of playing f4, and f4 just loses. So any time up to this point, you can see castling for white, even now castling for white is still playable, although he's slightly worse after this exchange, and I've got my pieces here nicely centralized, and his bishop is blocked in. But he could castle and maybe work up to playing f4 and try and reclaim the center. But in any case, black would have a slight edge there. But after f4, this does really appear to be winning for black. I take here, and he resigned after a while. He thought about it for a little bit and just resigned. I was a little bit worried about this line. Say he takes, I take, and then he castles, trying to exploit this pin. But it seems like I can just put my queen here, and everything is okay. Let's see. So in this position, after bishop takes f4, yeah, he doesn't really have a good answer. Most lines involve that the chess engine comes up with involve sacrificing the e-pawn by pushing it forward. And at this point, the chess engine evaluation is giving more than a 2-point edge to black. Although I have to say, if I was white, I would probably still play on. I mean, it's just a pawn, and lots of things can happen in a blitz game, but I guess it's okay if white feels like resigning at this point. Anyway, let's check out the next game. In the second game, white started off with knight f3. I went knight f6. He went d4, and I went d5. And now we've got a queen's pawn game, and he could also transpose into a queen's gambit with c4 like we saw in the previous game, but he continued with knight bd2. So this keeps us off the beaten track. So we're outside of any kind of known opening theory, and it's not particularly good. Black is probably already equal here. If black wants to play in the most challenging way, maybe the move c5 is in order here to try and ask white what he's planning to do about the center there. But I just played with bishop f5, getting the bishop outside the pawn chain, and this is probably good. Certainly after c3, actually, the advantage shifts towards black. So I keep an edge throughout the opening here. Let's see, I go e6. We're just out of the opening book here after he played c3. That wasn't particularly good. He goes knight h4. This doesn't really affect the evaluation. It just kind of changes things. He gets the bishop pair, but opens up a line for my rook and gives me better development. So black continues with a slight edge here. Let's see, he went queen b3. This maybe is a mistake, but I was wondering whether I should defend it with queen c8 or play b6, and I settled on b6, which does create some light squared weaknesses, and he does have a light squared bishop, which maybe he can take advantage of that at some point later. And indeed, the chess engine does recommend the move queen c8 here, just defending the pawn, keeping this perfect structure. The thing you have to ask yourself is, is the queen going to get into the game from this position, or how is the queen going to get into the game from this position? It's not an immediate concern, however, because as long as his queen is tied up attacking the pawn and your queen is tied up defending it, it's kind of a standoff. Both queens are a little bit out of play there, so no harm done. And your queen, maybe black's queen, can get into the game more easily from here than white's queen can, perhaps. Anyway, that may be why the chess engine prefers this. Anyway, I just didn't want to commit my queen like that. I played b6. This is okay, I guess. He went e3, go knight bd7, goes c4. So he is starting to play actively in the center, and I go with c5. He went bishop d3 here. So I think, aside from the wacky opening, black has been playing okay here, and maybe he's gotten back to equality. Is that true? No, the chess engine actually was still liking black quite a bit here. It wasn't until after I took that it started to think things were okay for white. So the chess engine would keep developing for black here, and just immediately start targeting this weakness and exploiting the open rook and not bothering with the center structure or letting white take there if white wants to. Um, I can always take back with pawns here, or there I can take with a knight if I want to. So I guess this is a good position for black. I guess that's why black still has an edge here. It's after I played c takes d4 here. Seems like white's doing fine in this point, or at least it's equal. Let's see. Then he went, oh, it's my turn. I went d takes c4. He takes here. So I gave him an isolated queen's pawn. I've got something to play against there, and I went rook c8. Rook c8 maybe is a slight mistake. It's can be a target there. And after rook c8, he could, for example, play bishop to a6, poking at that rook, although just castling here is fine as well. So bishop b5 is not actually the strongest move. And the best reply here for me is queen to c7, which is nice. I mean, I played bishop d6, which is also looking here, but this totally prevents castling because he just gets mated if he castles there. So, queen to c7 is something he has to, waste a tempo to deal with, and then I can develop the bishop. So anyway, that's a preferred way of developing, the way the chess engine prefers developing, as opposed to bishop to d6. The thing is, with the bishop on d6, he can kind of exploit it. He does. He plays knight c4, hitting the bishop, and I drop back here. And then he just castled. Here was another chance to play that bishop to a6 move. And it's even more effective here because, the rook doesn't have many good squares. It can only go to c7 or c6. And, on c6, it might be a target there as well. And on c7 it blocks this diagonal. So my pieces are actually a little bit awkwardly placed after bishop a6. So that's a nice way for white to play. But he castled here, and that's of course a huge blunder and should lose immediately. Although it's not mating, but it is just a winning attack after bishop takes h2 check. So I played this part correctly. People have pointed out my many blunders afterwards, but let's see. He goes king h1. And then, I looked at the chess engine to see what the best follow-up was. It likes retreating the bishop. And it retreats here, or I forget where else, maybe here. But the bishop isn't actually stable on the g3 square. I thought about bishop g3. Sometimes that's a trick, but it doesn't seem to help. The bishop eventually has to move away from that square. But that's one idea. Or knight to e4, which is similar to the idea I had, opening up a line for the queen. But maybe with the knight centralized over here, it's slightly better. Anyway, it prefers those to the move I played, knight g4, although this is still a winning attack. So nothing has gone wrong here. And that's a reasonable move. And then he played f3, which is a mistake. He should block the attack with g3. And then I have to keep pressing and prove that I've got some kind of attack there. But he went f3, kicking the knight. But this creates these weaknesses that I can exploit. And so I played, after f3, there's a forced mate. So that's why. That's a big mistake. So here, check is correct. This keeps the forced mate. King goes here. And now, can you see the continuation of the forced mate? Yeah, pause the video here and look for it. It's a very common tactic and a pattern you should be able to spot in your own games. I'm going to give the answer away now. I would have found this in a slow game, and on a good day I can find this kind of thing in a blitz game. Because, like I said, it is very standard. What you do is you sacrifice the rook just to drag the king back to the h-file so you can get the queen in with tempo. And then queen h2 is mate. When I played queen h2, it wasn't mate because I'd given him a time to move his rook away. So that's the point of that rook sacrifice. And it's just a very common motif, something you should always look for. I had opened up this h-file and I was not... or my opponent had opened it up for me. He opened it up this part and I opened up that part. and I was failing to take full advantage of it. That theme also recurs. Anyway, Queen H4, the move I played, does not lose the forced mate. It's actually still a forced mate at this point, but I have to play correctly. And the rook sacrifice is actually the quickest mate. It all goes with check, and so it's the easiest to calculate, but also the quickest. Let's see. He played bishop takes d7 check. Yeah, when you play a move like that, like queen h4 where there's no check, then you have to deal with you have to deal with these nuisance checks from your opponent. You gave him time to play that. So I just walked my king away from the check rather than exposing my king to more checks because I was pretty sure that I was mating here. And in fact, there is still a forced mate. And after rook to d1, as was pointed out in the comments, the forced mate here is queen to h1 mate. But like I said, I was kind of failing to take advantage of the fact that I had that rook on the open h file. And I just played the standard queen h2 check. Knight and queen or bishop and queen, you run into h2 and chasing the king around, which is very standard, but of course not best here. And in fact, it's no longer a forced mate. He can escape. So after that blunder on my part, I play the next part well. I'm chasing him around, and but now I have to worry about getting material back. You see, I wasn't worried about losing the knight here because I thought I had a forced mate, and I did at that point, but I blew it. And now I do have to start counting material and making sure that I come out ahead if his king manages to escape, which it is going to do. Let's see, he played king d3. I went knight f2 check. Yeah, all this is good. He went king c3. I went queen takes here, check. He blocked with the bishop. And, well, I could have just taken that bishop. But yeah, someone pointed that out in the comments too because of the pin on the knight. But anyway, I played knight takes d1 check. That's also good. It still keeps that same kind of winning advantage. There is still no forced mate in any of those lines. It's funny enough, but it's sometimes you just got to be satisfied with mopping up all the material, and grabbing the rook there was pretty good as well. Let's see. So he played rook takes d1, or grabbing the exchange, I guess. And then I went rook to c7, getting it away from the bishop so that he didn't take it. And now, if we pause and count the material, he's got 2 pieces for a rook, and I have extra pawns. So I'm material up, and his king is exposed. So I'm still winning by quite a good margin. Let's see. He went king d2 here. And went rook h2 check. He went king back to c1, so he's kind of getting his king to safety. And then here I played rook takes c4 check, which is not the strongest in this position. So from, let's see, from the point where I lost the forced mate up until this point, all my moves have kept like a +7 or +8 advantage, so pretty big win. This one gives it away, or gives back some of it. So the way to keep the biggest edge here is to play bishop to f4. The knight is still pinned here, and so I really am threatening to take that. So best for both sides is for him to take. I take with check. He goes here, and then I can just take this bishop. And so now I've got, well, 3 extra pawns. He's got 3 pawns, and I have 4 and 2. I have 6. So I've got 3 extra pawns, plus I have the exchange. And so that keeps that biggest edge. I saw this, and it was easy to calculate. I get 2 pieces for the rook. So now the material is even in terms of pieces, and I just have these 3 extra pawns over here. And that also is winning. It's just that my advantage declined from, like a 7 or 8 point advantage to a 4 point advantage, roughly. And I actually keep that 4 point advantage for the rest of the game, but it was a little bit tricky to play. And to always stay on the lookout for, any tactics where he might get some kind of continuous check or some fork against one of my loose pieces if I were to leave the bishop somewhere loose. So it was taking time, and as my time ticked away, I was starting to get a little bit nervous here. But at the end, let's see, I managed to block all of the checks and keep that edge and even start pushing these pawns forward. And at this point, white actually ran out of time. But I was, I still had that 4 point advantage here, and I was gradually pushing those pawns home. So I think in the absence of me getting into time trouble, I think I would have been able to win this game. But I was thankful that he ran out of time instead of me, because it did require me, even though I have the winning edge, I did have to think quite a bit during this last phase of the game to make sure I didn't fall into simple tricks, forks and perpetual checks like that. Anyway, it was a lot of fun to play. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you soon. Bye.